The Galactic Educational Summit was supposed to be boring. That is what I told myself when I, Crickstar of the Valonian High Council, received my assignment to oversee the Interspecies Youth Exchange Program on Station Helix 9. Boring, predictable, and utterly beneath my qualifications. I had negotiated peace treaties between warring star systems. I had mediated disputes involving 3 different forms of consciousness. And now I was babysitting. The conference hall buzzed with the usual chaos of first-day orientations. 17 species, 43 younglings, and exactly 0 patience for what I knew would be 6 months of headaches. The Craven students clustered in the corner, their exoskeletons gleaming under the station's artificial lights, clicking to each other in their rapid-fire language. The Phosian delegates floated near the ceiling, their gaseous forms shimmering with what I had learned to recognize as smugness. And there, sitting alone at the very back of the room, was the human child. Nobody told me humans were sending someone so young. She could not have been more than 12 standard years by their reckoning. Small, with skin, the color of burnt sienna and dark hair pulled back into 2 puffs on either side of her head. She wore what I would later learn was called a hoodie, bright yellow with some sort of earth creature on it. And she was reading a datapad, completely ignoring the social chaos around her. That is the human? My assistant, Plorks, gurgled from beside me. His 3 eye stalks bent toward her, with something between curiosity and disappointment. I expected more. They all look like that at that age, I muttered, checking my roster. Amara Johnson, 11 Earth years old. Guardian listed as, what in the 7 nebulas is a honey badger? Plorks's translator hiccuped. No match found. Possibly a kinship title? I made a note to research it later. First, I had to get through the opening ceremony without anyone starting an interstellar incident. Welcome, students! I projected my voice across the hall, letting my vocal sacs amplify the sound. You have been selected from millions of younglings across the known galaxy to participate in this prestigious program. For the next 6 months, you will live, study, and work together, learning the values of cooperation, respect, and mutual understanding. A Craven student, Thex something, raised one of his serrated limbs. What about the human? Our intelligence reports say humans are dangerous. Warriors, should she not be? Restrained? Laughter rippled through the room. The kind of laughter that made my skin plates itch with second-hand embarrassment. Amara did not even look up from her datapad. The human is a student, just like you, I said. Though I silently agreed that the reputation of humanity was concerning. The galaxy had heard stories. Humans who walked through fire. Humans who survived in the void of space. Humans who befriended death itself and called it Tuesday. But this was a child. How dangerous could she possibly be? Furthermore, I continued, you will each be assigned a mentor from your homeworld. These mentors will guide you, support you, and ensure your safety during your stay. That is when the door at the back of the hall slammed open. I have seen many things in my 4 decades of diplomatic service. I have witnessed the birth of stars. I have stood before the Council of Eternal Thought. I have even survived a surprise inspection from the Hegemony's Health and Safety Committee. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what waddled through that door. It was low to the ground, maybe half a meter tall, with a stocky body covered in coarse gray and black fur. Its face was marked with bold white stripes, and its eyes, small and dark, radiated an energy that could only be described as barely contained violence. It moved with a rolling gait that suggested either supreme confidence or complete disregard for the concept of fear. The creature stopped in the middle of the aisle, looked around the room with what I can only call withering disdain, and then sneezed. You have got to be kidding me, Plorks whispered. The honey badger, because of course that is what it was, shook itself and then proceeded to walk directly toward Amara. Every student in its path scrambled away. The Phosians actually desolidified in panic. One of the Craven students climbed onto a desk. Amara finally looked up from her datapad. "Hey, Moxie," she said, like this was the most normal thing in the universe. The honey badger, Moxie apparently, climbed onto the desk beside her and sat down. It stared at me. No, not just at me. Through me. Into the very core of my being, where it found me wanting. I floundered, which I never do. I was not informed that the human's guardian would be accompanying her? "You said guardians were welcome," Amara replied, her voice calm and measured. "Moxie is my guardian. She goes where I go." "That is an animal," Thex the Craven protested. "A barely sentient creature. This is a diplomatic and educational institution, not a zoo." Moxie's head turned slowly toward Thex. Very slowly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. "Moxie is fully sentient," Amara said, still in that same calm voice. "She is also a registered guardian under Earth's Interspecies Protection Act. She has passed all required behavioral assessments, and she does not appreciate being called barely sentient." To emphasize this point, Moxie stood up on the desk and made a sound. I cannot adequately describe this sound. It was part growl, part screech, part something that evolution should have deleted from the universe. It bypassed my auditory processing and went straight to my survival instincts, which immediately began screaming. Thex sat down very quickly. "Right," I said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Well, if the honey badger has proper documentation, then I suppose, technically, there is no issue. Moving on! You will now be sorted into living pods based on atmospheric and dietary compatibility." The complaints took 3. Nobody wanted to be in the same pod as the human and her demon beast. Eventually, I placed Amara with 2 other species that breathed oxygen-nitrogen atmospheres. A Trilaxian named V, who communicated through color changes in her skin, and a young Ossic called Genko, whose species looked like ambulatory plants and were generally too polite to complain about anything. "This is unacceptable," declared Cora, a Phosian elder who had materialized specifically to voice her displeasure. Her gaseous form pulsed with indignation. "The human child is a liability, and that creature is a walking violation of safety protocols." I was inclined to agree, but I was also tired and wanted this day to end. "The human has as much right to be here as anyone else," I said firmly. "If you have specific concerns, please submit them through the proper channels." "I have a specific concern," Cora hissed. "That thing is going to hurt someone." As if summoned by prophecy, Moxie chose that exact moment to leap from Amara's desk onto the refreshment table. She grabbed an entire tray of Craven nutritional cubes and dragged it under the table, growling at anyone who came near. "Moxie, share," Amara said, not even looking up. Moxie grumbled but pushed 2 cubes out from under the table. I rubbed my facial ridges and wondered if it was too late to resign. The first week was a disaster. Moxie destroyed 3 dormitory room dividers, 2 meditation gardens, and 1 extremely expensive holographic projector that had been a gift from the Andorian embassy. She did not do it maliciously. She was just curious. And apparently, honey badgers express curiosity through demolition. Amara, to her credit, repaired or replaced everything Moxie destroyed. She did not apologize exactly. She simply fixed things with a quiet efficiency that was almost more unsettling than the destruction itself. The other students avoided her, not out of fear of Amara, necessarily, but out of profound terror of Moxie, who had developed a hobby of appearing silently behind people and just staring. The Craven students filed a formal complaint. The Phosians filed 6. I was ready to send both human and honey badger back to Earth with a polite note about cultural incompatibility. Then came the incident with Zarkal. Zarkal was a Threxian, a species known for their physical strength and territorial aggression. He was also a bully, which I had noted, but had not yet had time to address properly. He had been making life miserable for the smaller students, particularly Jenko, whose plant-like physiology made him slow to move and easy to intimidate. I found out about the situation when I heard the screaming. I ran, which is undignified for someone of my rank, but the screaming had a quality that suggested imminent death. I burst into the common area to find Zarkal pinned against the wall, not by Moxie as I expected, but by Amara herself. The human child had somehow maneuvered the Threxian, who was twice her size, into a position where his own weight worked against him. "You are going to apologize to Jenko," Amara said quietly, "and you are going to mean it, and you are never going to touch him again. Do you understand?" Zarkal snarled something in Threxian that my translator refused to interpret. That is when Moxie decided to get involved. She did not bite, she did not scratch. She simply walked up to Zarkal, stood on her hind legs, and placed her front paws on his lower appendage. Then she looked up at him and made that sound again. That terrible, soul-eroding sound. Zarkal apologized so fast, his words blurred together. When I pulled Amara aside later to discuss appropriate conflict resolution, I expected defiance. Instead, she looked at me with eyes that seemed far older than 11 years. "He was hurting Jenko," she said simply. "Someone had to stop him. You were not here." "Violence is not the answer," I said, but the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. "I did not hurt him," Amara replied. "I stopped him from hurting someone else. There is a difference." And she was right. Infuriatingly, completely right. After that, something shifted. Jenko started sitting with Amara during meals. Then V joined them, her skin flashing grateful purples and golds. Other students, the ones who had been quietly enduring their own troubles, began gravitating toward the human child and her fierce little guardian. But the administrators, my fellow council members, they did not see it that way. "The human is a disruptive influence," Council Member Thrax insisted during our weekly meeting. "She does not participate in group activities. She does not socialize appropriately. And that animal is a menace." "She stops bullies," I countered, surprising myself. "She helps other students with their work. She has not broken a single rule that actually matters." "She is different," Cora added, her form pulsing with disdain. "She does not fit. Perhaps it was a mistake to include humans in this program at all." I looked around the council chamber at these beings who claimed to represent the pinnacle of civilization, and I felt something uncomfortable growing in my chest. Something like shame. "Different is not wrong," I said quietly. They ignored me. The vote was scheduled for the end of month 2. The council would decide whether Amara Johnson and her honey badger guardian would be allowed to remain, or if they would be sent home as incompatible with the program's goals. I knew how they would vote. I had seen it in their faces, heard it in their voices. They had already decided. I found Amara in the observation deck that evening. Moxie curled up beside her as she stared out at the stars. "They are going to send you home," I said, because I believed she deserved honesty. She nodded. "I know. I am sorry." "You should not be," she said, still looking at the stars. "You tried. It is not fair." "No," she agreed. "But fair is a fairy tale adults tell children. Real life is messier." 11 years old, and she sounded like a war veteran. Moxie raised her head and looked at me with those dark, knowing eyes. For the first time, I thought I understood what I was seeing. Not a beast, not a pet, but a guardian in the truest sense. Something that had chosen to protect this small human child against a universe that had probably not been very kind to her. "Can I tell you something?" Amara asked. "Of course. I did not want to come here. I was sent because I am smart, and because Earth wanted to make a good impression. But I have moved 17 times in my life. Foster homes, group centers, temporary placements. And every time, I am the weird one. The one who does not fit. The one who is different. She finally turned to look at me. I thought maybe, in space, with aliens from 1,000 different worlds, different would be normal. But it is not, is it? Different is different everywhere. I did not have an answer for that. Moxie found me when I was 6. She continued. Or maybe I found her. Does not really matter. We were both alone, both strange, both things that did not fit anywhere, and we decided that was okay. We did not need to fit. We just needed each other. Moxie made a soft chirping sound and bumped her head against Amara's hand. They can send us home, Amara said. We will be fine. We always are. But Jenko will not be fine. V will not be fine. All those kids who finally found someone who understands what it is like to be different, they will not be fine. And there it was. The thing I had been trying not to see. This human child, this strange, quiet, too serious child with her impossible guardian, had done in 2 months what I had failed to do in 4 decades of diplomatic service. She had built a community of the unwanted. She had made the misfits fit. I looked down at this small human and her fierce protector, and I made a decision that would probably cost me my career. The vote is in 3 days, I said. Let me try something. Amara studied me for a long moment, then nodded. As I walked away, I heard Moxie make a sound that, if I did not know better, I would have sworn was laughter. 3 days. I had 3 days to either save or doom my career. No pressure. The thing about bureaucracy, whether you are on Earth or in the farthest reaches of the Andromeda sector, is that it runs on paperwork, forms, documentation, protocols, procedures. The galaxy's most powerful weapon is not antimatter bombs or quantum destabilizers. It is administrative red tape. I spent the first day buried in the Station Helix 9 charter documents, specifically the sections nobody ever reads, because they are written in old galactic standard and formatted in a way that makes your optical organs bleed. Somewhere around page 3417, I found it. Clause 7b, subsection 12, paragraph 91. Student retention decisions must include input from the affected student population, weighted at no less than 30% of the final determination. Nobody had ever invoked that clause, ever. In the 200-year history of the exchange program, I smiled, which for a Valonian involves exposing far too many teeth and generally frightens people. Plorks actually backed away from me. Sir, you have that expression that means you are about to do something inadvisable, he gurgled nervously. I prefer to think of it as creative interpretation of existing guidelines, I replied, already drafting the formal petition. The second day, I did something even more inadvisable. I went to talk to the students. Not the popular ones, not the high-achieving offspring of ambassadors and council members. I went to the ones sitting in corners, the ones eating alone, the ones who looked like they wished they could disappear. There were more than I expected. A Crolian named Pip, whose telepathic abilities were considered too weak by his species standards, making him an outcast. A Vorinthi girl called Tala, who had hatched with only 3 arms instead of 4 and faced constant mockery for it. Brents, a young Ossik like Jenko, who was so shy he communicated primarily through written notes. And others. So many others. Why do you sit with the human? I asked Pip, keeping my voice gentle. He twisted his sensory tendrils anxiously. Because she does not think I am broken. When I cannot read someone's surface thoughts clearly, she just tells me what she is thinking. She says words work fine, and that my telepathy is like a bonus feature. Not a requirement. Tala added, her 3 arms gesturing emphatically. She said being different just means you have to be smarter, not stronger. And Moxie, she showed me that small things can be fierce. Brents handed me a note written in careful script. Amara says, I do not have to talk if I do not want to. She says silence is just another language. Nobody ever said that before. I collected 17 testimonials that day. 17 students whose lives had measurably improved because of one strange human child and her impossible guardian. Day 3 arrived with the inevitability of a collapsing star. The council chamber was packed. Word had spread about the vote, and apparently, interspecies politics made for excellent entertainment. Council member Thrax presided, his crystalline form refracting the chamber lights into uncomfortable patterns. We are here to determine the continued placement of student Amara Johnson and her guardian entity, Thrax announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. The chair recognizes council member Cora. The Phosian elder materialized. At the speaker's platform, her gaseous form roiling with conviction. This human child has been nothing but trouble since arrival. Property damage, inappropriate conflict resolution, failure to integrate with the larger student body. The creature she brought is dangerous, unpredictable, and has no place in an educational environment. I move for immediate removal and transportation back to Earth. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. Furthermore, Cora continued, warming to her subject. This sets a dangerous precedent. If we allow one student to flout conventions, to bring animals, to solve problems with physical intimidation, what message does that send? We are supposed to be teaching the next generation of galactic citizens about diplomacy, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence. The chair recognizes Council Member Vortash, Thrax intoned. Vortash, an elderly Kraven whose exoskeleton bore the scars of centuries, clicked forward. I agree with Cora, though it pains me to say it. The human child means well, perhaps, but she is too young, too raw, too human. Their species is known for violence, for stubbornness, for refusing to follow established order. Better to end this experiment now before someone gets seriously hurt. I waited, letting them speak, letting them dig their own graves with their words. The chair recognizes Crickstar of the Valonian delegation. I rose, carrying a data tablet that felt heavier than a neutron star. Honored council members, I submit for your consideration a formal petition under Clause 7b, subsection 12, paragraph 91 of the Station Helix 9 Charter. Thrax's form flickered. The student input clause, I explained, keeping my voice level. Any decision affecting student retention must include weighted input from the affected student population. I have here 17 formal testimonials from students whose educational experience has been directly and positively impacted by Amara Johnson's presence. This is highly irregular, Cora protested, her form pulsing angry reds. This is established protocol, I countered. This rarely invoked, perhaps, but entirely within the bounds of station regulations. Unless the council wishes to be seen as ignoring its own charter? The silence that followed was delicious. Thrax recovered first. Very well, present your evidence. I did. Each testimonial, read aloud. Each story of a student who had been struggling until they found someone who understood what it felt like to be different. Pip's account of learning that his weakness could be a strength. Tala's description of discovering confidence. Brentz's note about finding acceptance. By the time I finished, several council members looked distinctly uncomfortable. These are touching stories, Vortash admitted, but they do not address the core issues, the property damage, the creature, the methods. The property damage has been repaired or compensated for in full, I replied. As for methods, perhaps we should examine what those methods have accomplished. Zarkal, the Threxian student, has not had a single disciplinary incident since his confrontation with Amara. He has, in fact, been observed helping younger students with their studies. Curious, is it not? Intimidation? Cora hissed. Or consequences, I suggested. Something he had apparently not encountered before. As for the honey badger, Moxie has harmed exactly 0 students. Yes, she is unusual. Yes, she is intimidating. But unusual and intimidating are not the same as dangerous. You are splitting hairs, Thrax said. I am pointing out facts, I corrected. Facts that the Council seems determined to ignore in favor of comfortable prejudice. The chamber erupted. Council members shouting, arguing, demanding order. Thrax had to use the resonance gavel 3 times before silence returned. You forget yourself, Crickstar, he said coldly. Your role is to present information, not to insult this Council. Then I apologize, I said, though I did not mean it. Let me present one final piece of information. I activated the chamber's main display screen. Footage from the station's security feeds appeared, carefully edited to show a timeline. Amara arriving, alone and quiet. The first weeks, isolated and ignored. Then, slowly, the change. Students approaching her, small groups forming, laughter in the common areas, cooperation in study sessions. The final clip showed last night's communal dinner. Amara sat at a table with 16 other students, representing 12 different species. They were talking, sharing food, arguing about something on a datapad. Moxie sat under the table, accepting treats from multiple students, her terrible, fierce energy somehow transformed into something almost gentle. It looked like what we had promised these students when we invited them here. It looked like unity. That, I said quietly, is what you are voting to destroy. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Thrax spoke. The council will adjourn for deliberation. We will reconvene in 1 standard hour with our decision. The longest hour of my life followed. I found Amara in the same observation deck as before, Moxie beside her, both staring out at the infinite dark. She did not ask how it went. She probably already knew. I did what I could, I told her. I know, she said. Thank you. If they vote against you, I want you to know that it is not because you failed. It is because they are afraid. She turned to look at me, this small human child with eyes that had seen too much. What are they afraid of? Change, I said. Being wrong. Having to admit that their way is not the only way. The usual things that terrify comfortable people. Moxie made a soft sound, something between a grunt and a sigh. Amara reached down to scratch behind her ears. Can I tell you something else? She asked. Always. I used to think being different was my fault, like I was broken, and if I just tried hard enough, I could fix myself and be normal. Moxie taught me that different is just different. Not better, not worse. Just another way of being. She looked back at the stars. If they send us home, that is okay. We will find another place. We always do. But I hope they do not. Because I think maybe some of the kids here needed to learn that lesson too. The call came 15 minutes later. The council had reached a decision. We returned to the chamber. The gallery was even more crowded now, students pressing against the barriers to see. I spotted Jenko, V, Pip, Tala, Brents, and so many others. They looked scared. Thrax called the session to order. The council has reviewed all evidence, testimonials, and relevant charter provisions. We have deliberated extensively. The vote on the continued placement of student Amara Johnson and her guardian is as follows. He paused, the way officials always do when they want to build drama. I resisted the urge to throw something at him. 4 votes for removal, he continued. 4 votes for retention, 1 abstention. A tie. A perfect, impossible tie. However, Thrax said, and I heard the shift in his tone, per the charter clause invoked by Council Member Crickstar, the student testimonials carry weighted value. When factored into the final calculation, the decision shifts in favor of retention by a margin of 0.03%. The chamber exploded with noise. Cheers from the gallery, protests from council members, general chaos everywhere. Order! Thrax bellowed, The decision is final and binding. Student Amara Johnson and her guardian Moxie will remain in the program for its duration, subject to standard behavioral expectations and periodic review. I looked over at Amara. She had not moved, had not reacted, but I saw her hand tighten slightly on Moxie's fur. The honey badger looked up at her human, then over at me. If an animal could look smug, Moxie absolutely did. After the session ended, after the council members dispersed still arguing, after the students rushed down to congratulate Amara with an enthusiasm that clearly overwhelmed her, I found myself alone with Plorks. "That was the most stressful thing I have ever witnessed," he gurgled. "And I once observed a supernova from insufficient distance." "Worth it, though," I said. "Was it? You made enemies on the council today. Your career advancement prospects just evaporated." "Probably," I agreed. But I also remembered something I had forgotten. "What is that?" "Why, I became a diplomat in the first place. Not to maintain comfortable systems, but to build bridges, to find common ground, to make space for those who do not fit into easy categories." I watched through the observation window as Amara tried to escape the crowd of well-wishers while Moxie ran interference, herding the more enthusiastic students away. That human child and her impossible guardian just taught me more about diplomacy than 40 years of service. Plorks was quiet for a moment. "What happens now?" "Now? Now we do our jobs. We educate, we supervise, we occasionally prevent interstellar incidents. The usual. And Amara?" I smiled again, the kind that shows too many teeth. "Amara will be fine. She always is." The remaining 4 months of the program passed faster than I expected. Amara never became popular, exactly. She remained quiet, observant, prone to reading in corners, while Moxie napped beside her. But the community she had built, that collection of misfits and outcasts and different ones, it grew. By month 4, nearly half the students orbited in her general sphere, not as followers, but as something more interesting, as people who had found permission to be themselves. The final project was a group presentation on interspecies cooperation. Amara's team, predictably, was composed of the students nobody else wanted. Pip with his weak telepathy, Tala with her missing arm, Brents, who barely spoke, and half a dozen others who did not fit the standard definition of successful. Their presentation was not the most polished. The holographic displays glitched twice, and Brentz's parts were presented entirely through text-to-speech. But the content, the actual work, it was brilliant. They had found ways to leverage their differences, to make weakness into strength, to turn what others saw as flaws into unique perspectives. They won. Not by a lot, and several council members clearly voted against them out of spite, but they won. At the closing ceremony, Thrax gave a speech about the importance of unity and cooperation, about how this program represented the best of what the galaxy could achieve. Standard political nonsense, well delivered. But then, he did something unexpected. He called Amara to the stage. She walked up, slowly, Moxie padding beside her, both of them looking faintly confused. "This student," Thrax said, and I could hear the reluctance in his voice, the admission of something he did not want to admit, "has challenged many of our assumptions about what success looks like. She has reminded us that different does not mean deficient, and she has, perhaps, taught us that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected sources." He presented her with a medal, some ceremonial thing that the program gave out. Amara accepted it politely, thanked him in that quiet voice of hers, and returned to her seat. Moxie, however, had other plans. The honey badger hopped onto the podium, looked out at the assembled dignitaries and students, and made that sound. That terrible, wonderful, absolutely unforgettable sound that had haunted my nightmares for 6 months. Then she sneezed on Thrax's foot and waddled off stage. The laughter that followed was probably not very diplomatic, but it was genuine. On the last day, as students prepared to return to their homeworlds, I found Amara packing her few belongings. Moxie was attempting to fit herself into a bag that was definitely too small, because apparently honey badgers do not understand physics. "You made a difference here," I told her. "Maybe," she said, folding a yellow hoodie carefully. "Or maybe I just existed loudly enough that other people felt like they could too." "That is what making a difference is," I said. She smiled, a real smile this time, not the polite mask she wore for officials. "I learned something too, you know. I learned that even in space, even with 1,000 different species from 1,000,000 different worlds, the stuff that matters is pretty much the same everywhere. People want to be seen. They want to belong. They want someone to say it is okay to be who they are." "Very wise for 11 years old," I observed. 12 now, she corrected. "Birthday was last week." Moxie ate an entire anniversary cake meant for the Phosian delegation. I decided I did not need to know the details of that particular incident. "Will you come back?" I asked. "The program runs every year. You would be welcome." She considered this, scratching Moxie's head as the honey badger finally gave up on fitting in the bag. "Maybe, if Moxie agrees. She is the real decision-maker in this partnership." Moxie looked at me with those dark eyes and made a sound that was almost friendly. Almost. As I watched them leave, this strange, small human and her fierce, impossible guardian, I thought about all the reports I would have to file, all the questions I would have to answer about my decision to invoke that obscure charter clause. It was absolutely worth it. 6 months after the program ended, I received a message. A simple video file from Earth, no explanation attached. I opened it out of curiosity. The video showed a youth center, the kind of place humans warehoused their unwanted young. Amara stood in front of a group of children, all of them looking as lost and different as she once had. Moxie sat beside her, calm and watchful. "Being different is scary," Amara was saying, "especially when the world tells you different is wrong. But here is the secret they do not want you to know. Different is where all the interesting stuff happens. Different is where change comes from. Different is how we make the world bigger." She paused, glanced down at Moxie, who yawned to show an impressive number of teeth. "You do not have to fit," Amara continued. "You just have to find the people who understand that not fitting is okay. And then you build something new together." The video ended. I saved it to my personal files, adding it to the folder marked Important Things to Remember. Then I drafted my response to the Council's inquiry about whether the exchange program should continue accepting human students. My answer was simple. Yes. Absolutely yes. Especially the different ones. Especially the ones with honey badgers.